This is the Andres Segovia Show.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Andres Segovia Show. I am your host, Andres Segovia. Today, I have a guest on to talk about a role that, it affects me directly, but a lot of times we often overlook it. And that's with respect, in this case, Los Angeles, the County Board of Supervisors. And on my show today is a candidate for one of the districts of the County Board of Supervisors, John. John, by all means, introduce yourself to the audience who may or may not know you.
Thank you so much, Andres. So my name is John Cruikshank, and I'm a candidate for Los Angeles County Supervisor District 4. A little bit about myself. I'm currently an elected official in the city of Rancho, Palos, Verdes, where I'm Mayor Pro-Tem. I've been on the city council there since 2017. I also am a licensed civil engineer. I've run my own engineering company since 1996 here in Los Angeles County, and have a small family. My wife, Jennifer, and I have been married. This year was 30-year anniversary. And we have one son. His name is Sean, and he recently graduated from Arizona State University. But I'm a third generation Los Angeles County resident and care very deeply about where I live.
Yeah, and God knows that LA needs people that care about it right now more than any other time. We're going to touch on some of the issues here, but just to get to know more about your background here, because civil and structural engineering, we actually have a state law. This actually came up where we have to do for anybody that has like a balcony or an exposed stairwell for like six feet and above, they need some kind of structural engineering report. I'm assuming your company is going to be busy doing some of these reports. They have been.
Yeah, no, so that's the Senate Bill 326 work that you refer to. And as the infrastructure they have, in this case, it's our buildings and our balconies. They age, they get termite damage, and then they become to the point where they structurally cannot support the weight of people on the balcony. So unfortunately, we do have incidents where they do collapse. So this particular bill, which my company, JMC Squared, does handle those inspections and the engineering work for. But basically, we're going out to anyone that has, like you said, 6 feet or above balconies and testing them, reviewing them, and making sure that they're safe and giving clearance reports on those in compliance with that Senate Bill 326.
Yeah, and I think that there was a timeline that was extended because I believe the original due date was the end of this year, but they added a year, if I'm not mistaken, on that.
It's probably good that they did because we have found that many building owners have not yet complied with that. And I think my concern would be that we only have so many engineers in this state, and we only have so many contractors in this state. And so if all the apartment owners and condominium owners and people that have these balconies that need to be inspected wait till the last minute, they're going to find themselves with very few of us to be able to address their needs quickly. So my recommendation would be that if you are in a situation where you do need to comply with that current law, that you should get something done sooner rather than later, because if you wait till the very end with everyone else, you're going to end up with a lot higher prices. You might not find people to be able to do the work. And then if you're out of compliance, even given that additional year to comply, I think the state ends up having fines and other implications to that. So I would highly recommend that anyone that has this situation contact their local engineering company and make sure that they get that taken care of.
Yeah, and you know what? None of this was on my notes. It just so happens that when we met at the multi-million-dollar trade show and landlord conference in Long Beach, held by the Apartment Owners Association, and I noticed there were a lot of structural engineers on the trade floor, and I'm like, that sounds familiar. And as a property manager myself, but I don't have any of them that are beyond a story. It didn't affect me directly. I'm like, hold on, what's this about? And it's now that it's on the back of my head, and you brought something up. None of this was in my notes, but I got to ask you because you're in the field. Compliance. Was compliance simply getting the report, or the report showing that, hey, you need repairs and you have to get this addressed, and then there's like a follow-up report or something like that?
Right. No. So It basically, so you don't want to, of course, have any type of failure of a balcony, because balconies are typically second, third, fourth floor in a building. And
Mhm.
if there's an issue where that balcony actually collapses, then you're going to have someone get injured or killed,
Yeah.
unfortunately. And so the law is to look at the statistical probability. You need to be 90% sure that all the balconies are properly addressed, and because that gives you a sense of a good security that the balconies are in shape and don't need any additional work done to them. And so
Yeah.
the first step is that inspection and
Okay.
basically a clean bill of health. And if you get the clean bill of health, then you're done. You basically have the engineer or a licensed architect. So that's the other thing. It has to be a licensed engineer or licensed structural engineer, to
Structural
be
engineer. Yeah.
specific. I'm a civil engineer, but I have licensed structural engineers that work for me. It
Mm.
has to be a licensed structural engineer or a licensed architect. It can't be a contractor. It can't be just a civil engineer. And those are the ones that can certify and to basically say that those balconies are safe. If
Mhm.
they find that some of the balconies do need repair, then certainly if you're a building owner, you want to know that, because that's a
Yeah.
huge liability for you if something does occur to one of the people that occupy that space or have friends over on that balcony. So the next step would be that if there are balconies that actually need to be fixed, then the recommendation would be by the engineer or the architect to have those fixed, and then plans would be developed, and then the work would be done to strengthen those balconies to ensure that they'll be safe for many years to come.
Yeah, and the reason I'm asking because there was a couple of questions that I was digging into. Is I was also asking other engineering firms, especially those that were on the floor, and most of the time they would get stumped when I would ask them, "Well, who's enforcing this? Is it going to be, for example, Los Angeles has a Department of Building and Safety. They have, depending on where you are, if you're in a rent stabilization ordinance zone, you have the housing." Department and the housing community development and all that, because no one seems to know who we're answering to. So it's once we get
Yeah.
these reports, who are we actually turning them over to?
Well, so my understanding is that it will be the state of California, since it is their law that they've passed,
Mhm.
and it's basically paperwork. Like the engineer does the report, certifies that the balconies, and then are okay, or some of them might need repair, but there still needs to be a report prepared by an engineer or architect. That goes to the state agency, and it's
Okay.
the state agency that then files that information, and
Okay.
and they can very easily reach out to any of the buildings that have balconies. I'm sure they have an entire list of all of them in the state of California. And
Mhm.
if these some of these HOAs or locations, apartment buildings, haven't complied yet, it's going to be very easy for the state to send out letters to all of them saying that it looks like you've missed the deadline.
Mm.
And I'm sure that, so you can see that the state of California could probably very easily enforce this rule, because it's either you're complying or you're not. And the
Yeah.
compliance means you're preparing that report and sending it to them.
Yeah. Gotcha. So that was one question. The other question was, um, it almost seems like, is it we're paying for two reports, or it's better to get someone out there to inspect it before getting said report to say, hey, can you check if we need repairs on these things?
That's an excellent question. And what we've been finding is that contractors are going out and convincing homeowners associations to do the work, saying that that's in compliance. And then the homeowners association realizes that that's kind of the cart before the horse. Like the basically the horse is the engineer or architect coming and doing the inspection, because it could very well be that every balcony on your building is fine. So if every balcony is fine, you don't have to do anything further other than file that report with the state.
Mhm.
If it's not fine, let's say 5 of the 100 balconies on your building are not fine, then you move forward with plans for fixing those 5 balconies versus all 100 balconies. So as a HOA, a homeowners association, or an apartment building owner, it makes way more sense to go the design engineer route than it is to start with the contractor, because people
Mm.
need to know, and you know this as a property owner, construction is 10 times the cost of design. So it's much more cost effective to have people do design and analysis than it is to actually go and build something. And so the owners need to realize that the first step really is to go to the engineers or the architects first, see what's required, have them develop plans if necessary, and then go out to bid. And don't just go to one contractor, go to three contractors with the plans and get the best price possible so you can, make sure you get value for your limited resource, which is money in this case.
Yeah, it's so a scenario which is probably most likely. So this is what it might look like. Then, and correct me if I'm wrong. It's like, hey, engineer, need you out here. I have balconies. Check how they are. They prepare a report. Report says, hey, XYZ needs some repairs. And then, as you said, the whole process to draft plans, engineering, contractor, and all that to get that repaired. Then once all that's said and done, hey, engineer, I got the work done. Can you get back here and do another report to see if I'm in compliance or not, if everything's all right? Is that more or less how it would look like? Like,
Yes.
you're basically paying for two reports because that's exactly what it is. There is no other way about it. It's not like I pulled a permit, so now come finalize it. That's not how a scenario might be. It's more like if you're not in compliance, expect to pay for two reports.
Well, and so, I mean, obviously, we want everyone to stay in compliance. And, some of the laws that they passed in the state of California are excellent laws. And I feel that this is one that is an important law because the safety concerns of a collapse or failure of a balcony that's elevated 2, 3, 4 stories above the ground is a very dangerous scenario. And unfortunately, we've got the weather, of course, we're near the coast, many of these properties. So you've got that sort of issue. You've got termites and all the things that degrade the structural capacity of a balcony. So the hope is that you're only doing one report, and that one report gives your balconies a clean bill of health. The second report, if you will, would be more the recommended repairs, which I would call construction plans versus just a report or letter. So the first one's kind of a letter that reviews, looks at the waterproofing and the structural integrity. The second one is actual construction documents on what to do to fix the balconies that need to be fixed, not all the balconies. And so my point is that instead of hiring a contractor directly and having them fix everything, why not just fix the things that need to be fixed? And so that's why you'd want to hire the engineer or architect first.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And for people who may not be aware, I don't remember if this Senate bill was in response to what happened. I believe it was in Miami, where overnight just like half a building just collapsed on itself.
I don't think it was from that, but that was obviously a tragedy in Miami. I think it stemmed from what happened up at UC Berkeley. There was a collapse, and I think a few students actually got killed. So that's what my understanding is. But there have been collapses, and certainly to the point where they had to pass this law to kind of open building owners' eyes, because if you own a building, you have a lot of responsibility as a building owner, and there's going to be things you can't think of all the scenarios as a building owner, just because you deal with so many issues that the tenants have to, they call you on, whether it's plumbing or electricity or ADA compliance or whatever it is. I mean, building owners have a tremendous amount of pressure on them. And so a balcony is not necessarily something that you would think of. Like if you're not a structural engineer or an architect, you're not necessarily thinking about balconies failing right off the side of a building. And so it's a critical a bill that they've passed. And so
Yeah, and I do agree with it. I just wasn't entirely sure how all that was going about, because I was getting questions from my clients. Like, I asked the same questions. I don't think I got a clear answer, but I think this actually clarifies a lot of things and also shows that what you do in your field. So this will actually make a very good educational clip when I'll probably segment this out. It's like, hey, you guys got to tune into this with respects to SB, whatever, because people are asking me about it on my socials as well. So that kind of segues though, like the reaction of like, I didn't know that there was, or at least I forgot about this law. It didn't affect me directly. So at first I'm like, well, I didn't know, but I might know people that does. And sure enough, when I spread the word after the trade show, it's like, oh snap, I gotta get on the phone with some engineers. It's like,
Mhm.
oh well, see, it makes people jump into action. So that brings us in a way over to the county board of supervisors, because when we think about uh, who affects us, what rules and laws and regulations are passed or considered and all that, we think of more of the city council. We don't think so much about the county as a whole. It's like, what's the county? Whatever. It's like, yeah, but you live within the county. Um, Before anything else, because this is the area of what you're trying to get into here as you're running. What exactly is the role of the county board of supervisors?
Well, I think before COVID-19 was among us, I think many of us didn't even really have to think about the county board of supervisors. But once that occurred, we started to see that they were in control of our health departments, and they were able to do many things that changed the way we live. And they closed our beaches and trails. They mandated eviction moratoriums, and so that people that couldn't pay their bills, they were allowed to stay in their rental properties. So you'd start to see that the county government has quite a bit of control over all of our lives. And I love to ask people when I'm out and about how big the county government is. And people are shocked when I tell them that the current budget for this coming year is $47 billion. And there's 115,000 employees that work for Los Angeles County. You do the math on that. And like you said, most people think of their city councils when it comes to the rules and regulations that affect them the most. And that's probably true. But if you look at the amount of tax dollar per person in LA County, it's much more than most cities pay or bring in terms of their revenues per person. And so the budget is huge, and there's many departments. So they oversee our prisons, our juvenile detention, our beaches, our waterways. They oversee many of the parks, roads, bridges, a health department that there's that's one of the bigger departments in LA County. Of course, there's a public works department. And so you start to think about all that. And so there's 88 cities in Los Angeles County. And there's many locations that are called unincorporated areas.
Yeah.
And so even though each one of those 88 cities that are already incorporated and they have their own governments, like you mentioned, the unincorporated areas don't have their own government. So, for instance, in the 4th District, where I'm working to win a seat there, that has many areas, and I would be considered the mayor of those areas. I would act as the mayor or representative of those areas of unincorporated parts of Los Angeles County. And just an example of that, like the city of Avalon is an incorporated city, but the rest of Catalina Island is an unincorporated area. So that's part of the 4th District. So in the 4th District that I'm working to be representative of is 32 cities. It's the southeast part of Los Angeles County. Like mentioned, there's 5 supervisors. So you start up on the north in Whittier, and basically you have the Orange County border, and you have the 710 freeway. So you have many cities coming down, like cities like Bell Garden and Bell, Whittier, Cerritos, Downey, Norwalk, Bellflower, all the way down to the port of Long Beach. So the city of Long Beach is the biggest city there, other than parts of Los Angeles. And you come across to the port of Los Angeles, including San Pedro, Wilmington, and then over to where I live in the Rancho Palos Verdes area and the Palos Verdes Peninsula, and then Torrance. So 32 very unique cities that all have their own city governments but also rely quite a bit on LA County for many of the services that we get.
Yeah, well, that's a very interesting cut that they did there. Because if I understand it, these districts were redrawn about 3 years ago, I think.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, well, that's fascinating. And you did mention it at the get go there that it wasn't until 2020 and the whole COVID lockdowns that people were not aware. The county board of supervisors, in my case, I was aware of them a little sooner because of having to deal with them directly, but they ended up imposing their own rent control ordinance there outside of Los Angeles, and that then they're affected when they started putting down just cause evictions, eviction moratoriums, and all this. And Barbara, what's her face, the one that's in the Department of Health, that is not a doctor and has nothing to do with health. And if I'm not mistaken, she was with Gavin Newsom at that French Laundry. So I have to look back on that. She might have been present there, but we couldn't.
It
And these
seems
are the
like it
big.
would have been obvious, right? Because we all would just remember that photo of him there and with those people sitting around the expensive wine and food. And she does have pretty well-known white hair that we've seen many times. So I don't remember that, but I'd have to go back and look myself. That's funny.
Yeah, because I do remember certain Department of Health heads that were there. I'm like, that's fascinating. What an awkward place to be caught at dining. It's like, it was one of those Hunger Game moments where it's, if anybody has seen it, you have the elites up there and then us, the peasants over here.
Well, Andres,
And
remember this. So when I was mayor of Rancho Palos Verdes, in our city, we rotate the mayorship, and I was
okay.
mayor in 2020. So in March of 2020, I actually contracted COVID, and I was one of the first elected officials in the country to get COVID.
Oh wow.
And I got COVID at Trump National of all places. So,
Mm.
that caught national attention. And so I was on many of the news, the nightly news at
That's
that
why your
point.
name looks familiar.
Yeah,
I
right.
do remember this.
So my warning was back then that, even though I had it for 3 days of just the worst headache ever. My hope was that our governments, including our county government, wouldn't overreact, because you probably remember back in that time they were starting to label businesses essential versus non-essential.
Yes.
And my point was every single business is essential, because it's essential to all of us to be able to have our jobs and be able to raise money to live. And so how can
Yeah.
something be considered non-essential? So my hope was that the government wouldn't overreact, and we all know what happened after that. And LA County was probably the one to overreact the most, certainly
Yep.
with the homeowners or the apartment owners like yourself, where they've tried to solve many of their problems on the backs of mom and pop apartment owners. And it's ridiculous what happened. And that's one of the reasons that I'm running for office for this position, because the current board of supervisors have done things like this with no concern at all for people's life savings. The number of businesses that were destroyed by their actions that were not warranted. And so when I met you at the Apartment Owners of Association, I was invited to have a booth there, and I just the frustration by people that I met was just palpable. And so it's important that we start to look at who our elected officials are, because they do affect our lives so much. And we can't just keep voting for the same people over and over and over again and expect there to be different results. There won't be.
Correct. Yeah, and one of the big issues that have been affecting certain properties that I manage, and I know everybody's been touched by this, has been homelessness, and this is one of the things that you have there. Unless Xi Jinping is going to visit San Francisco, the Democrats will address homelessness.
Yeah,
And
for a couple days while he's there, and then what? Where do they shovel him off to? Are they going to put big curtains in front of him? I don't get it.
yeah, I saw the social media feeds on that because there was a clip going around. It's getting a lot of traction in the national news because Gavin Newsom admitted it. It's like, yeah, we cleared them because Xi Jinping's going to be here, but he said it in such an awkward way. It's a 17-second clip and it's worth watching because like you kind of jumbled your words there, didn't you? That you got caught on this. But some people in the comments were actually, it was hilarious because like, yeah, but where'd you put them? On the underpass of the 10 freeway? Because over the weekend there were a ton of fires on the 10 freeway.
Oh
Like, well,
man.
that's true, but it's too far for San
Jeez.
Francisco. But for people that don't know, Los Angeles, and the homelessness statistics, depending on what you look at, they're either broken down as the city of Los Angeles or LA County. But
Right.
just even taking LA County as a whole, it's the homeless capital of the nation.
Yes.
Inexplicably, it's insane, and includes homeless that are from out of state for some reason.
Mhm.
How would you address this continuously growing problem?
Yeah. Well, it is continually growing. I look back at my opponent, Janice Hahn, and she had talked about homelessness back in 2016 when she was first running for county supervisor. And she said, and at that time there were, I think they said there were 40,000 homeless at that point. And now it's ballooned to at least 80 or 90,000. Who knows, because the counts are never accurate. And she was saying that this is a problem that I'm going to address, and I'm going to be her solution was that she was going to retrain our veterans so that they didn't live on the street. And honestly, that's could be a great solution, but she
Mm.
never did that. I do see that she has bought using taxpayer dollars hotels or motels that are profitable and are bringing in tax dollars to the city of LA and the county of LA, and shut those down and provided free homes to the veterans. And honestly, I love our veterans, but I think when you just give someone a free home and you don't expect anything back, then all you're doing is enabling people being freeloaders, honestly. So, what would I do? So, there isn't one solution, Andres. Of course, you know that.
Right.
It's a big problem. And as an engineer, we learn when the problem is too big to just solve with one answer, you got to break it into smaller problems. And so the first one is the mentally ill. The mentally ill are a huge part of our homelessness, and they're probably the ones that are the biggest danger to themselves and to us. And so that would be one of my first focuses. And the great thing is that these issues are nonpartisan, and there's people on both sides of the aisle that agree that we should bring back conservatorships. When you talk to people that are a little older in politics or a little older in life, and they'll say, "Oh, it was Ronald Reagan's fault that we have homelessness." Well, Ronald Reagan was president back in 1980. And so I don't think you can continually blame Ronald Reagan for homelessness. And then you ask them, well, what did he do that created it? And they'll say, well, he closed the hospitals, the mental institution and hospitals. So, okay, so if that was the solution back then and he stopped them, then why don't you bring them back? And so conservatorships would actually force people that need the proper medical help to be in hospitals, not being medicated out on our streets where it's really unsafe and it doesn't solve the problem. So that's kind of step one to me, the biggest issue. There's another solution right next door in Orange County that I believe we should be doing. The Orange County Rescue Mission, they're 100% privately funded. They only spend about $16,000 per person per year for housing and food.
Wow.
When you're in that system, you can leave if you want. You're not forced to be there, but if you commit to it, you got to stay there on campus. You can't come and go. That's part of the problem is every time people come and go, when they go, they have all those vices out there, the alcohol, the drugs, and all that entice them back into bad behavior. At the Orange County Rescue Mission, you have to stay there. You have to do something every day for 8 hours while you're getting retrained for some type of job to get you back on your feet. And after a year and a half to 2 years there, they're able to graduate from their program and go off and provide for themselves. They have a 98% success rate at the Orange County Rescue Mission. No government funds, all privately funded. Tell me one program in LA County that has a 98% success rate.
Yeah. And something that you mentioned there at the beginning, just because this is happening a lot, and this is actually affecting one of the buildings that I'm managing. I was aware of the general plan of like years ago about buying either dilapidated buildings or poorly run hotels or whatever, and apartment buildings, and just buying and the city buying them up to turn them into either low income or just free housing for for the homeless. The problem is it doesn't address the root cause. Why are they homeless? And something very telling because of you and I both share in us caring about our veterans. It's a shame that we'll thank them for their service and right go back to the street where you were. It's like wait, we're not helping them when they're not when they're back here after giving so much. And there was a story, and this involved the Los Angeles Police Department too, because it's a beautiful moment. It was a homeless on a wheelchair veteran that was in on Venice Beach, and one of the police officers was helping to arrange to get him over to the VA. I think they have a housing place for veterans on Wilshire Boulevard, and they were able to do that. Police force showed up, and were like, escorting him, and there were cameras there involved. Making it a beautiful moment, and the officer was choked up because hey, I have a military family, and this is a big deal for me. 3 days later, he was right back where he was because I didn't want to be there. Like, yeah, you could put a roof over someone's head, change the stats, you didn't address the issue, and that's what ultimately I believe the homeless problem needs to be addressed. Like you said, that there's more than one solution to this because there's different problems per se, And I think the mental illness one is one that I believe that needs to be more immediately addressed, because it can be more immediately addressed than, say, those that are struggling with their other vices, such as whatever drugs are on the streets now. And I know fentanyl has been on the news a lot, but I think you're starting off somewhere right, instead of, well, let's just put a bandage on it and say we just housed them and
Right.
we brought the stats lower, or what Gavin Newsom did, just Thanos all the homeless out of there and it'll just be back because whatever, they just reappeared. It, it, and I guess that goes it segues nicely into the other section, which is that this, in a way, goes into public safety issues. We've had homeless encampment fires that affected buildings next to them. We're kind of joking about it, but there were some fires. At first, it was reported as a pallet fire under the 10 freeway over the weekend, but I'm learning more that some of it was encampment fires, which can only mean it was due to maybe cooking drugs or whatever it might be. So the county board of supervisors, I believe, wouldn't they be in charge of dealing or addressing the Los Angeles County Sheriff?
Yes. So they oversee the budget for the sheriff's department. Of course, the sheriff himself or herself, depending on who gets elected, is elected county-wide. So currently, it's Sheriff Luna. Robert Luna is in charge of the sheriff's department, but it's certainly the county supervisors oversee the budget, and they also oversee the the care and operation of our prisons and our juvenile detention systems, which currently, if you've been following that, there's consent decrees, which are basically fix-its. They're saying that these detention centers and jails are inadequate, inhumane. To me, it's a simple thing. You've got to fix the facilities, and we need enough facilities to put all the criminals away. We can't be letting criminals out on the street. Of course, we have another situation, Andres, that you're aware of, that we have a current district attorney, George Gascon, who is unwilling to really prosecute criminals, and his belief that everyone will be all good as soon as you arrest them and they're all just going to be great back on the street is a fool's errand. And so for me, I'm for any of the district attorney candidates other than him. But the board of supervisors has a lot to do with our criminal justice system, and they need to be much more supportive in that. And you're right. I was just talking to some restaurant owners here in San Pedro, where my office is, and they were saying a couple weeks ago, a homeless person with schizophrenia was in their restaurant, basically harassing people at their restaurant, at their bar, and screaming at people and scaring customers away. And they called the police, and the police, they don't have enough resources, and so they didn't send anyone. So this particular restaurant owner had to physically remove this person, and they're not equipped to do that, but they had to do it because of the safety of their employees and their guests, and they physically removed this person from their restaurant. Our business owners shouldn't be under this sort of undue pressure. That's not right. And so, going back to our law enforcement, these officers, they're working overtime shifts, and it's already a stressful enough job at an 8 hour a day or a 10 hour a day. But if they have to work, double shifts, that's an undue pressure. You can't work properly without enough sleep and in that sort of stressful environment. And so we're putting our officers in a terrible situation. But the reason we're having trouble recruiting is that there's police departments all over the country that are better places to work. And even if the money isn't the same, at least you know that your elected officials that hire you support you and are going to put criminals away for their crimes instead of basically letting them back on the street and to commit more crime. And you almost probably feel like, what's the point of me doing my job if I do my job, but then you can't get the criminals to actually be behind bars and have some punishment for their bad activity. We got to make crime illegal again.
Yeah, and it's, as you mentioned, Gascon and others, and I know some of the county board of supervisors have done this because, I guess, as not a result, but a direct reaction to the racial riots of BLM was to defund the police,
Mhm.
and our streets are not any safer. Meanwhile, the same county that was defunding the police, and Gascon letting, and not just Gascon, but also Gavin Newsom, letting inmates out because of, they said it was due to COVID or whatever, onto the streets. They were criminalizing law-abiding citizens for not complying with the laws. Like, wait, but aren't those guys in prison because they broke the law?
Mhm.
But you're gonna blame non-essential businesses, or in some cases, and if this continues, it will be seeing more of this vigilanteism. I hate even using that now, but after what happened over the weekend, I don't know how much you know about this. I'm assuming you might have heard about it. At a subway, there was it's someone. They describe it as mugging. This man was mugging this woman at a subway, and this, what the news was calling vigilante, or what I call hero, who had a gun, fires into the air, I believe 2 rounds to get that guy to scare him away from her, in which he did. The hero's arrested, and everybody that's interviewed is like, it's crazy. He put his gun away. It's crazy. He put his gun away. He was being a responsible, carrying member of practicing a Second Amendment.
Exactly.
And not just that, the woman that he saved suddenly said, I just wish he didn't use a gun to help me. He could have done something else. What else could he have done?
Wow.
And that's where we're at, in that this kind of behavior continues. Like what happened, I think, is Daniel, what's his face? It's the more controversial one, because they said it was a white man choking out a black homeless man. The homeless man ended up passing away. What they don't talk about was the other black man that was helping Daniel on the floor, but who's the one that gets arrested, and they're trying to charge him for murder and all that, was Daniel. No one's going to be stepping in and helping anybody. This is the direct result of what happens when our police institutions are broken down, when everyone is vilified, where law-abiding citizens are being turned into criminals, and we're enabling criminal behavior. We're not helping or addressing our homeless, where in some cases it's mental illness, as we talked. All this almost seems commingled, but it all goes together, and it's really hard to address the one thing, because it all stems from one thing: irresponsibility at our leadership level. We don't have leadership. We don't have people that will own up to it. We don't have people that have a spine to address this. They'll just say, oh, just go with the political flows. Like, oh, this will get me voted. And in some cases, George Soros money, like he put Gascon in there. So that's how we're seeing a lot of these players being put in place to dismantle our institutions from within.
Well, let me add to, you're spot on with that, Andres. Let me add to this, that people, there's so many good people out there, and they're afraid to speak up now because of what you just mentioned. You do the right thing, and all of a sudden you get the woke crowd turning against you. But I still believe that most people understand fairness. They understand what's right. And I think most people are just looking for leaders to stand up for them. And the problem is that our current crop of leaders here in California, they're basically part of one party system. So we've got one party rule. It's been that way for 20 years. And now over the last several years, you've got 2, 3, 400,000 people per year leaving California because they just had enough. And the only reason, other than taking care of a sick relative across on the East Coast or something, the only reason you ever leave California, which is the most beautiful state, beautiful place in the world, is because of our leadership. And people are leaving. And the people that are leaving are people that create jobs, that are business owners, property owners. These are the people we need the most, and we should be treating them so much better. And that's what I want to do, is bring back fairness to everyone. And we also, we talk about the homeless, and you and I talked about it, but we forget about the people on the lower part of our income scale, where when you have inflation, you have high gas prices, and that is so regressive to them. And it hurts them the most, and it puts them in the most jeopardy of becoming homeless. And instead of worrying about always the homeless, let's worry about the people that can become homeless. Our elderly people that they don't earn an income anymore. They're on a fixed income, and 25% of our population are senior citizens, and we're putting all of them at risk with this inflation. And so that's one of my other core 4 issues, which is economic empowerment. Nobody's talking about how to end inflation and how to start lowering prices. And that's all I try to talk about this all the time. In fact, even though I have the 4 issues that we talked about, I got a question the other day, like, for me, what means the most? And honestly, I feel inflation is one of those things that if we can start to bring that down, it'll start to solve a lot of the other issues because it puts people in a situation where they become desperate. Either they become homeless and desperate or they can't afford whatever it is and they go out and commit crimes because they're desperate. Yeah, there's just criminals out there, sure. And those criminals need to be put away. And we're not doing that either. But there's things that our county board of supervisors and our state government can do that can really make our lives better, but they're not doing it. And I'm not sure why. I think many people believe they don't do anything because it keeps us dependent upon them and keeps them in power. They certainly figured out a formula to keep themselves in power. But then you ask yourself, is my life better than it was 10 years ago? And if your answer is yes, you're fooling yourself.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you there. And I didn't have on my notes to talk about the economy, but you are right that uh, it's kind of like the rising tide. It'll address almost a lot of these other issues, especially when people say we have a money problem. So okay, inflation is one of them, and as you said, our senior citizens, a lot of them are on fixed income. Those that are mom and pops that own property are feeling those effects of, especially in Los Angeles, not having been able, folks. If you're new to listening to this program, I have sounded the alarm so many times on rent control, especially as someone that was a realtor. No longer, I don't pay the trademark, so I don't use realtor. I'm a real estate broker. But in saying that it's going to destroy the the financial viability, it's going to destroy the livelihoods of those that have these units here and there. They have not been able to raise their rents in 4 years, which is absolutely insane. If that's not communism, I don't know what is. So that's Los Angeles alone, and we're supposed to finally be able to do so February 2024 because King Garcetti, some people call him mayor. When he was mayor, he ruled as a king, as a dictator. He said once the emergency order of COVID is lifted at the state level, Los Angeles can then 1 year later raise the rents. And for those anybody that know, when there's an RSO, a rate stabilization ordinance, they do so on a schedule. So the schedule was originally 7%. That was announced over there at the AOA conference. And I know Dennis Block, and he and I finally met in person, but he was talking. He was pretty confident about that sticking. And I'm like, yeah, but maybe not the percentage in the raising of the rent. And sure enough, it looks like it's being halved. And at this point, if at all, because LA County can take the action. So right now, all eyes are on what the LA County Board of Supervisors will do. So that's why I'm like, your role is considerably more important. The role that you're vying for is considerably more important. And I think if you could, for those that are listening, if you could sum up why you're running, like we talked about all these issues and how they affect you, but why do you feel like you would make that difference? What would be your elevator pitch to them?
Yeah. Well, going back to the largesse of LA County and the 10 million people and being a third generation LA County resident and loving Los Angeles County, I have been afforded every opportunity in the world to succeed in my life. But that's not happening anymore for people. People are leaving LA County, and it's because of our politicians. Things like rent control and eviction moratoriums are 100% wrong. I would never vote for those. And maybe I'd be only one vote at first, but I would be very convincing because I would get the people behind me. Right now, you have a board of 5 people. Those 5 people have never signed the front of a paycheck. They've never lived the experience of a business owner. They don't know what it's like to take risks. They don't know the pressures we're put on. We're job creators. We're people that care about our community, and we're people that succeeded in our jobs to the point where we could create companies and create opportunities. And we're the ones that are bringing in the tax dollars and helping our society thrive. So the free market works in America, but it's dead in LA County right now because you have leaders that don't understand it. They have no ability to solve our problems. And all they worry about is woke ideological beliefs where they can get their pictures on Twitter with different color flags and just continue to get votes. And yeah, people don't necessarily know who I am, and they of course know who my opponent is. But my two opponents, now that we have Sheriff Alex Villanueva in the race, they know who those
Oh,
people are, and they don't know who I am. But the thing is, I have the spine and the backbone to actually make hard decisions. I tell people when they say, "Well, why is there no homeless in Rancho Palos Verdes?" And I tell people it's because you get what you allow. And we in Rancho Palos Verdes, we don't allow those things. We look after our residents. We look after our businesses and our schools. We need people doing that again. We need to use our ears and our mouth proportionally. We have two ears and one mouth. Use them proportionally. Listen to people. At the Board of Supervisors, they only listen to you for 1 minute, and you're lucky if they're even listening to you. They're looking at their
yeah.
phones and not even paying attention, and that's so disrespectful. And I'll bring respect back to the county board. The county board was a great organization at one point, but they're no longer that way, and we need to bring that back for the sake of all of us.
Yeah, well, amen to that. And I did not know that Alex was running. Is he running for the fourth district?
He is. As many people know, he did lose his reelection bid to become sheriff again, and during that time period during the election, the Board of Supervisors pulled a fast one on him, and I always thought this was wrong, where they gave themselves the power to be able to pull or remove a sitting sheriff from their office, even though the sheriff is elected with all 5 districts, and each one of the supervisors is only one district. So, but they didn't do that for the district attorney, who I would argue would be someone that'd be much better to remove than the sheriff at that point. So he did enter the race in September. His goal is to remove the current supervisor because he's pretty upset about what happened, and I
Too
don't
much
necessarily
payback.
blame him for that. My only point is that I don't believe that his skill set is anywhere near mine in regards to being a supervisor and overseeing the $47 billion budget and those sort of things. He has a skill set that's well suited for being a sheriff.
Yeah, and I happen to agree with you there. I can't say I was a fan of Alex until I saw him actually standing up to the county board of supervisors during the draconian lockdowns and all that. It's like, well, you grew a spine, because ironically, it was Democrat versus Democrat,
Yeah.
and you're right. And I do believe if she wasn't responsible for it, she was at least spearheading it, where Janice was kind of making it. I don't. Did the people? Did Los Angeles give the power to the board of supervisors to remove an elected sheriff by the very people?
Yes, so it was
I don't.
put on the ballot by the supervisors, but because the
Yeah,
county has its own charter or constitution, it
yeah.
has to go in front of the voters. And Janice Hahn and others on the board of supervisors convinced the voters to vote for that, and it ended up passing. So that's currently on the books, but that would be something I would work to get off the books. I mean,
It's ridiculous.
that's
Yes.
ridiculous.
Yeah, it's because I didn't live in LA, so I'm not registered to vote there either. Oh, it would have been like, folks, do you realize what they're asking you to do? They're telling you to give up a right, and you willingly did it.
Exactly. They willingly did it. It was crazy. And
Ugh,
we were hoping that Robert Luna, who was his opponent, would have stood up and fought that. And even in private conversations, we believed he was against it, but he never spoke out against it either. And that was very disappointing. Um, Going back to what you said, Andres, we need leaders that have backbone and do the things they say they're going to do, and not just say things to get elected. And then once they're elected, they just become part of the broken system that we have.
yeah. Oh, I think we touched on plenty of issues. There were other questions I could have asked you, but I like ending on a high note for here. Uh, when is do you have to be primaried first, or how does that work?
So yeah, thank you for asking. So it is a primary first. The first primary date is March 5th, but in California we vote 30 days in advance. So everyone starts voting in the first part of February.
Mhm.
With there being 3 candidates, if not one of the candidates gets 50% plus one, then they do not win. But if they do get over 50%, then they win. And then there is
Okay.
you don't have to go to the general. The top 2 vote getters in the primary move on to the general election. I
Okay.
believe that I will come in at least second place. I'm shooting to get 35 to 40% of the vote in March primary. so that I can continue on and get more name identification through November. And then I believe that whoever comes in third in the race will support my candidacy, because I don't believe either of my opponents like each other very much. And so I could see them supporting me. Of course, in the general election, you're going to get probably double the amount of votes. You're going to get a lot of new voters that don't vote in the primary, that vote in the general election. But you got another 8 months process. But that, I think, gives me an advantage, because I could be on more shows like yours, and people can get to know who I am and understand that, the right leaders are the people that are willing to listen to them. And I have a track record in my city of success. I believe Rancho Palos Verdes can be a model for all of LA County by valuing the taxpayer and valuing our residents, and balancing open space with residential and commercial, and letting our businesses thrive. In our city, we actually eliminated the home-based business tax. So if you have a home-based business in our city, you don't have to pay any taxes in our city. We believe that's a model of helping people out to get started in their companies. And I believe, as a county board of supervisor, I'll be able to convince 2 more supervisors to go along with some ideas that are really going to help people, like eliminating home-based business, and many other ideas that I have to really help LA County.
Yeah. Well, I like a lot of what I heard. Unfortunately, as I told you, I don't live in that county. So
well, you're giving me time on your great show. So thank you. This is more than I can ask.
Well, yeah, and I do appreciate making the time to come on and answer some of these questions and have some of these discussions that I feel are not being had enough, just because either political revenge, complacency, or like what's going on right now with the County Board of Supervisors. But it's also, as you said, and I agree with you here, that there are more people that they don't follow this stuff. They're trying to make their day to day, looking after their stuff, also not realizing how much others that are just involved in activism are affecting their daily lives, and they should be paying more attention to these things. They should be more pay attention to what you have to say, the ideas and solutions that you're presenting, especially if they're going to be actively complaining about nothing ever being done. It's like, yeah, but you had an opportunity to vote and you didn't. So this is my way of telling the audience. It seems to be a lot of voter fatigue out there right now. There's an election. It's almost like a perpetual election, it feels. Because there's a primary, and some people think that the primary, that's it, right? It's like, no, there probably is something else, and they have to, they don't understand the whole thing. They just think, I gotta vote again. Didn't I just vote for you? It happens with the petitions too. So there's still a lot of low information voting happening out there, and I'm trying to educate people more. And I know it's exhausting, but these are important. The county role is important, and I applaud you for even considering like jumping into this, because you know what you're getting into. I don't have to explain that to you. So I do wish you all the best. For those that are watching and listening, where can they follow you to be up to date, and even support you if they like what they hear?
No, I appreciate that. So people can go to my website, johncruikshank.us. So just my full name, johncruikshank.us, or they can follow me on Twitter at Save LA County. So it's at Save LA County. You can find me on Twitter. I am on the radio as well, on 790 KBC Sunday mornings at 8 a.m. I know it's a little bit early, but you can listen in. It's a half-hour show, or you can catch those podcasts and many of my videos that talk about my issues at my website. And I do ask, and thank you, Andres, for mentioning about voter fatigue. We recognize that the biggest party in California is not the Democrat or Republican Party. It's the party of apathy, and people have basically given up. And that's how our politicians want it. They want you to give up so that you can give them power for the rest of their lives. I'm trying to change that in LA County. And to do that, I need to get my name out there and my messaging. So if you like what you're hearing on today's show, and please share Andres's show with your friends, 10 friends, and say, listen to the show. And then that way we can get the word out and get enough people to vote in March. And I can get in the top 2 and then become the next county supervisor of the 4th district in November of 2024. So I really appreciate your having me on today, Andres.
And for those watching and listening, you know the MO. Every link that was mentioned here will be available in the show notes accompanying this episode at www.danielsegovia.com. John, thank you so very much. I wish you all the best. And who knows, after the primary, we'll probably have you back on.
Oh, I'd like that. Thank
Either
you,
way.
Andres.